What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're taking a look at the best £5 million defenders, and I think this is one of the most interesting price points in FPL this season. There's loads of options, plenty of potential for clean sheets and attacking returns, and most importantly, a lot of the players that we'd be looking at putting into our squads are also nailed on for minutes. So I'm going to go through the options in just a second. If you haven't already checked out Fantasy Football Hub, make sure you do. There is a link in the description below. If you sign up to one of their subscriptions, there's up to 50% off at the moment, and if you don't win your mini league, they'll give you your money back. Terms and conditions apply. I'll link them in the description below as well. Otherwise, let's jump into it. So let's take a look at the clean sheet potential for the first 6 game weeks. I've taken this data from Fantasy Football Hub, and what it's taken into account is the fixtures that the team has, but also the strength of the defence. So if Luton had slightly better fixtures than Arsenal, Arsenal would still come out ahead because their defence is much stronger. So the top 5 are Man City, Arsenal, Brighton, Liverpool, Chelsea. I think the only team there really that people might be thinking they're not quite sure about is possibly Chelsea because of where they finished last year, but I would expect them to improve quite a bit this season. Then you've got Brentford, Palace, Aston Villa, Newcastle United, Man United, and straight away there's pretty much a £5 million defender option that you could at least consider from most of those teams. Now, one caveat that's worth noting is you get to pick 5 defenders. You only have to play, for most people, 3 or 4 of them every single week. So the players you select don't have to have perfect fixtures every week. So take Man United, for example. If you didn't want to pay £5.5 million for Luke Shaw and you wanted to go for Lisandro Martinez at £5 million, well, one of the reasons Man United are in 10th place is because they got Spurs away, Arsenal away, and Brighton at home in the first 6 game weeks. But if you only have to play Martinez in game weeks 1, 3, 6, and 7, well, all of a sudden he's playing Wolves at home, Forest at home, Burnley away, and Palace at home, which is pretty good. So you'll have to look at your own team and kind of decide when you might need these defenders. If it is a defender that you're looking to play every single week, then they would definitely want some attacking potential and preferably be higher up this list for clean sheets as well. The other thing to kind of think about is maybe a bit more longer term, right? Because I know people get players in for the short term fixtures and they'll say things like, well, I'll just transfer them out after that. But stuff crops up, injuries, players will be in form you weren't expecting, all this kind of stuff can happen, and suddenly you don't have those transfers you thought you did. So thinking a bit longer term can help as well. These are the clean sheets for the first 10 game weeks. The big difference is really, Brighton dropped down. So if you're looking at someone like Estupiñán, pretty good for the first few game weeks, maybe not quite so much clean sheet wise after that. And then there's 2 teams that jump up quite a bit, Aston Villa and Newcastle United, who go into 3rd and 4th place respectively. So if you were looking to play, I don't know, like a Gabriel and an Estupiñán and Luke Shaw pretty much every single week for the first 6 game weeks, and you wanted someone on your bench to come in later on when the fixtures kind of swing a little bit, well, Moreno and Schär might be options worth thinking about that aren't quite so good straight away, but are maybe a little bit better in the long term. So that's the clean sheet potential. Let's look at the attacking threat. So I've listed here who I think will probably be the top 10 £5 million defenders that people at least consider for their FPL squads. And we've got per 90-minute numbers from last season. So expected goals, expected assists, then you combine the 2 to get expected goal involvement. The most interesting name on this list is probably Pedro Porro, who comes out on top with 0.33 expected goal involvement. Now, there is some context to put around that. He only came to Spurs in January. He didn't necessarily play every single game either. So his minutes are a lot less than most of the other players on this list, but it's still over 1,000 minutes that he played, so it's not insignificant. There is definitely potential there. I think you need to have a bit of faith that Postecoglou is going to improve Spurs, especially from a defensive point of view, and that Porro is going to get regular minutes, and that he's going to be as attacking, because they're probably not going to play with a wing-back formation. But like I said, there is potential there, especially when the fixture's clear for Spurs. Then you got Fabian Schär in 2nd place. He's actually tied with Estupiñán on 0.24 expected goal involvement. The reason that I've put Schär above is because his goal threat is much higher. It's actually the highest on this list at 0.16 expected goals per 90 minutes. He is an absolute threat from set pieces, and last year only got 1 goal from about 5 XG. So this guy is due some goals, and as we saw just a minute ago on the clean sheet potential graphics that I had, Newcastle longer term, their fixtures are great. So if you had that extra 0.5 million to spend over Botman, I do think he's worth it. The only issue is, straight away from game week 1, where you're probably not going to want to play a Newcastle defender for 3 of the first 4 game weeks, you might as well probably just start with Botman. But after those fixtures clear, I do think Schär is worth that 0.5 million upgrade, and he is 1.5 million cheaper than Trippier as well. Estupiñán is fantastic. He's actually the second highest owned player in the game right now, which I do think is a bit crazy. As good as he is, I'm surprised he's that highly owned, but we know how good Brighton's fixtures are in the short term. He doesn't really have too much competition either for that left-back spot, so let's keep an eye on the transfer window. Then you've got Alex Moreno at Aston Villa, currently injured, so keep an eye on that. But a bit like Newcastle, Villa's fixtures do clear after the first few game weeks, and he is much more attacking than the rest of the Aston Villa defence, so he's one to keep an eye on. Then it's actually Ben Mee at 0.13 expected goal involvement. I don't know if he is attacking enough where I would spend the extra 0.5 over one of the other Brentford defenders. I think Schär is better than Botman. I'm not sure Ben Mee is quite, worth that extra 0.5 over the other Brentford defenders. So he's on the list because his attacking threat's quite good. Brentford's fixtures are pretty decent as well, but I'm not sure he's one I would go for. Then you've got Gabriel. You know how much I like him. Decent enough goal threat. Arsenal, very good defence as well. Then it's Ake. I think minutes-wise, I would have a little bit of an issue there. So that's why he probably won't be someone that I consider for my team, especially if they sign Vardiol. But obviously, we'll keep an eye on that. If it looks like he's going to play the first few games, Man City's fixtures are excellent. Then it's Konate, 0.11 expected goal involvement. He's, 3 million cheaper than Trent. He's 1.5 million cheaper than Robertson, 1 million less than Van Dijk. Did get a lot of minutes last year as well. So I think if Liverpool's fixtures were great, he's someone you could consider if you don't have that extra money to spend on the more attacking defenders. Then you got Dunk and then Lisandro Martinez to end. Martinez really doesn't have much attacking potential whatsoever. Dunk isn't a slouch from set pieces and stuff like that, but given they're the same price, I don't really think there's much competition between him and Estupiñán at the moment. So I'm going to go through who I think are the top 5 choices from those £5 million defenders, starting off with number 1, and it is of course Gabriel. I'm going to talk about him a lot during pre-season. When I think about my current draft, Harden is like 100% locked in, Saka is like 99%. I think Gabriel is not far behind. I'd put him at like 98% chance to be in my team by the time we get to game week 1. Arsenal was second for clean sheets for the first 6 and the first 10 game weeks, only behind Man City. But the key thing with Arsenal players is, especially like Gabriel, their minutes are pretty secure. When I think about Man City players, well, will Akanji start regularly enough? Will Ake start? They're just all these headaches I don't necessarily want to have. So I think when you combine Arsenal's clean sheet potential with Gabriel's goal threat, bearing in mind he was second for total XG for defenders last season, I think he has to be number 1. Next up is Estupiñán. Brighton were third for clean sheet potential in the opening 6 game weeks. So when you look at those fixtures, Man United away in game week 5 is the toughest one they've got. Outside of that, I wouldn't be too concerned. Even Newcastle at home in game week 4, that's not an easy fixture, but at least it's at home. And outside of that, you've got Luton at home, Wolves away, West Ham at home, and Bournemouth at home. So things look pretty good. Maybe a little bit longer term, it gets tougher for Brighton. But given how attacking Estupiñán is, he was joint second for expected goal involvement on that list I showed you just a minute ago. I think you can play him in most fixtures. And right now, there is very little competition for places for that left-back spot. If Brighton sign someone during the transfer window, maybe the conversation changes. But as things stand, he is first choice left back. And even if they wanted to rotate him a little bit around Europa League when that starts back up, the guy's an absolute machine. Brighton's fixture congestion was quite bad towards the end of last season, and he still started every single game. So they've got good fixtures. He's very attacking. He's only 5 million. I actually think he could have been 5.5. He's got to be second on this list. So even though Newcastle's fixtures aren't great for the first 4 game weeks, as I already mentioned, they've got to play Man City away, Liverpool at home, and Brighton away from game weeks 2 to 4. I've put Fabian Schär third on this list because he's absolutely nailed on, and he is a genuine threat from set pieces. So I looked up the numbers. In total last year, he had 5.61 expected goals and only scored 1 goal. So we should expect a few more to come throughout this season. And Newcastle's defence is very strong. It was second for expected goals conceded last year. So there's a lot to like about him if you can kind of hide him on your bench until the fixtures clear from like game weeks 5 onwards. And when we look at the fixtures for Newcastle from then on, it's Brentford at home, Sheffield United away, Burnley at home, West Ham away, Palace at home, Wolves away. Up until you play Arsenal at home in game week 11, there's not too many fixtures there that would worry you. And even in game week 1, if you had to play him against Aston Villa at home, that's not the worst fixture either. So I think Fabian Schär is being overlooked overlooked, probably for good reason. Botman is 0.5 million less, but I think that goal threat difference is quite big. So if you're only going to play Botman in game week 1, and then possibly not use him again until game week 5, and you've got the spare cash, you're happy with the rest of your team, you don't think you're going to get stuck when it comes to transferring other players in and stuff like that, I do think Fabian Schär is a better option for the 0.5 million extra. So I've put Pedro Porro 4th on the list. I do think I'm being slightly drawn into the excitement that some FPL managers I follow are showing towards him, who also happen to be Spurs fans. So you've got to be careful with that. But I can't ignore that 0.33 expected goal involvement. It is potentially very exciting. You also need probably a bit of faith towards Spurs that they will improve this season under Postecoglou. For me, Spurs and Chelsea are the two teams that I really want to see during pre-season. We could potentially have new managers, new formations, new tactics. How will Pedro Porro be used? Is he going to be given license to get forward? If so, he could continue to be extremely attacking, get you those goals and assists, and hopefully a few clean sheets along the way. You probably do need to try and not use him for the first couple of game weeks. Brentford away, Man United at home, not ideal. But I like those fixtures between game weeks 3 to 5. And for 5 million, he has got that potential to go bigger than that price point. So perhaps the most unknown player on this list, with all factors considered in terms of what's changed at Spurs, but maybe one of the most exciting as well. So the first thing to say before we talk about Alex Moreno is he is currently flagged with a hamstring injury that he picked up towards the end of last season. So that is obviously a concern. If that is still an issue going into game week 1, then you absolutely do not pick him. But if he shows some fitness during pre-season and Unai Emery gives us positive signs in terms of how he talks about him, he is someone that I would think about. And there's a few reasons why I like him. One, he really found his place before he picked up that injury. Lucas Dean wasn't really playing much at all. And under Unai Emery, Villa have just constantly improved. So hopefully that would continue into next season. And in terms of the fixtures, there's plenty of games where you could play him in the first kind of 6 to 10 game weeks. So I've got the first 6 listed on screen. Everton at home, Burnley away, Palace at home in particular. No issue playing him in any of those. You could use him as part of a rotation as well. And if we look longer term than that, you got Brighton at home in game week 7, Wolves away in game week 8, West Ham at home in 9, Luton at home in 10, Nottingham Forest away in 11, Fulham at home in game week 12. So a bit like maybe Newcastle defenders, like I've said, they don't necessarily have 5 to 6 perfect fixtures in the first 6 game weeks, but they got some that are decent enough to play him in, and then it gets even better after that. So if he can show you that fitness during pre-season, given how attacking he is compared to the rest of the Aston Villa defenders, and probably a little bit more nailed on than someone like Matt Cash as well. We'll have to see in pre-season how they line up. I think everyone is expecting Moreno left back, Matt Cash right back, and then 2 centre backs. But if they got Pau Torres, if he comes in, and obviously how good Tyrone Mings was last year, we might see both of those play, with Konza playing as the right back instead, and possibly them having like a back 3 in the build-up with Alex Moreno given license to get forward. And that is the part that I really kind of like the look of. So there's more solid, obvious defenders to go for, like Gabriel, probably Estupiñán, maybe even Fabian Schär. Obviously, Pedro Porro put 4th because of his attacking threat, but Alex Moreno is an all-round solid option. And again, at 5 million, I know it's always annoying to pay a little bit more than everyone else, but he probably is worth that 0.5 over Mings if he continues to get regular minutes. So just to quickly talk about the rest, I do think Nathan Ake is worth considering and could get good minutes for the first 5 to 6 game weeks. And Man City's fixtures are excellent. I just sometimes get a little bit tired of that constant worrying about whether or not Man City players are going to play, and they do have a lot of options as things stand. They usually play with that back 3 in the build-up, so John Stones goes into midfield, so you'll have like Ruben Dias central centre-back, and then maybe a Akanji or Walker right centre-back, and then Ake left centre-back. But if Laporte is still at the club, he can play that position, and if they buy Vardiol, he could also play there as well. Now, I know what people will say. If Vardiol was bought for like 100 million, of course he's not going to be on the bench. But this is Man City. Look what happened with Grealish and stuff like that when he first came in. It doesn't necessarily mean that Vardiol will play from the start. But if he does come in, that is then that worry you've got in the back of your mind with Ake. You don't have that with the likes of Schär, Gabriel, probably Estupiñán as well. So Man City's fixtures to open the season are great. It's just whether or not I want that headache. But we'll probably kind of talk about that as we get closer to game week 1. Lewis Dunk is a solid option. I just think when Estupiñán is the same price and more attacking, and you're only going to pick one, it's got to be Estupiñán. You could double up on Brighton defence, I guess. But if I was going to do that, I'd probably buy one of their goalkeepers for 4.5 million instead. Konate is worth considering just because of how much cheaper he is than the rest of the Liverpool defenders. The problem is, if Liverpool's fixtures were that great, where I felt I had to have a defender, I probably would just try and pay the extra to get a Trent in instead. Maybe even $1 million more to get Van Dijk, because his goal threat is pretty decent. So I like Konate. I'm just not quite sure where he fits in right now. Ben Mee, I would rather just have a 4.5 million Brentford defender instead. And Lisandro Martinez just doesn't have enough attacking threat for me. I think when you can get Luke Shaw, who also takes some set pieces as well, for 0.5 million more, he's probably the one to look at. So let me know in the comments below, is there any other £5 million defenders you're considering? I know we didn't really talk too much about Chelsea, but I want to see who's looking like the first choice back four before we discuss them more. And I think it could be more likely we're looking at them as a 4.5 million defender rather than Thiago Silva. So let me know what you think about my kind of order, Gabriel, Estupiñán, and Schär, etc. If you've enjoyed that video, give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Trying to hit 400,000 subscribers before game week 1. And make sure to check out Fantasy Football Hub. Link in the description below.